My name is Alex, and I'm 24 years old. If you had told me a few months ago that a single night, a few glasses of wine, and a seemingly harmless joke could unravel my entire life, I wouldn't have believed you. But life, as I've learned, has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. This is the story of how a moment of thoughtless honesty turned my world upside down, a tale of love, laughter, heartbreak, and the messy, complicated nature of relationships. It all started innocently enough. A girls' night out, a ritual we'd been practicing since college, a chance to unwind, catch up on each other's lives, and of course indulge in a bit of harmless gossip. We were a tight-knit group, bonded by years of shared experiences, secrets and unwavering support. There was Sarah, the ever-reliable one, always ready with a listening ear and a practical solution. Then there was Emily, the life of the party, whose infectious energy could lift anyone's spirits. And finally, there was me, somewhere in between, trying to navigate the complexities of adulthood while holding onto the carefree spirit of my youth. That particular night, we had gathered at our favourite little wine bar, a cosy spot with dim lighting, soft music, and an endless supply of our favourite Merlot. The conversation flowed effortlessly, from work woes to weekend plans, and eventually, as it always did, to our love lives. Sarah was happily settled in a long-term relationship, Emily was enjoying the thrill of casual dating, and I was in a bit of a rut. I had been with Mark for almost 2 years, and while things had started off strong, the spark had begun to fade. We were comfortable, maybe too comfortable, and the excitement that had once defined our relationship had dwindled into a routine. It wasn't that I didn't care for him. I did. But there was a nagging feeling that something was missing, a sense of dissatisfaction that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As the wine flowed and the conversation deepened, I found myself opening up about my frustrations. I shared my concerns about the lack of intimacy, the predictable routine, and the feeling that we were drifting apart. My friends listened attentively, offering words of comfort and support. They had seen me through my fair share of romantic ups and downs, and their unwavering belief in me was a constant source of strength. And then, in a moment of what I thought was harmless banter, I made a joke. A joke about Mark's performance in bed, a comment that was meant to be light-hearted and humorous, a way to diffuse the tension and make my friends laugh. I never imagined that those words, spoken in the privacy of our little group, would have such far-reaching consequences. The next thing I knew, the laughter died down, and an awkward silence filled the air. I glanced at my friends, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and disbelief. And then, I saw it. Mark, standing a few feet away, his expression a mask of hurt and anger. He had come to surprise me, to join our girls' night out, and he had heard everything. The room seemed to spin, the music fading into a distant hum. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a sense of dread that settled deep in my stomach. I had made a terrible mistake, a careless remark that had shattered the trust and intimacy of my relationship. The aftermath was a blur. Mark stormed out, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I tried to follow him, to explain, to apologise, but he was gone, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with regret. The rest of the night was a haze. My friends tried to comfort me, to reassure me that things would work out, but their words were lost in the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I felt a deep sense of shame, a burning embarrassment that I couldn't shake. I had betrayed Mark's trust, violated his privacy, and jeopardised our relationship, all for the sake of a fleeting moment of laughter. I had allowed my insecurities and frustrations to cloud my judgment, to override my sense of compassion and respect. As I stumbled home that night, the weight of my actions pressed down on me. I replayed the scene in my head, each word, each expression, each agonising moment. I had made a mess of things and I had no idea how to fix it. The following days were a blur of tears, apologies and unanswered phone calls. Mark was distant, his voice cold and unforgiving. He needed space, he said, time to process what had happened. I understood, but the uncertainty was agonizing. I turned to my friends and family for support, seeking their guidance and wisdom. They listened patiently, offering words of comfort and advice. But ultimately, the decision was mine. I had to face the consequences of my actions, to confront the pain I had caused, and to find a way to move forward. This is the beginning of my story, a story of love and loss, of mistakes and redemption, of the messy, complicated journey of life. It's a story that I never thought I'd be telling, but one that has shaped me in ways I never imagined. And it all started with a harmless joke, a joke that changed everything. The silence that followed my ill-fated joke was deafening. It stretched, heavy and thick, filling the small wine bar with an unbearable tension. I could feel the blood. Rushing to my face, a hot flush of shame spreading across my cheeks. My eyes darted between my friends, their expressions a mix of shock, pity, and a discomfort that mirrored my own. But it was Mark's face that held my gaze, his eyes dark and wounded, his jaw clenched tight. He stood there, frozen, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had heard. The colour had drained from his face, leaving him pale and drawn. The happy surprise he had intended to deliver had been replaced by a crushing wave of humiliation. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of my careless remark hanging heavy between us. Mark's sudden appearance had been a surprise, a gesture meant to show his affection. He had wanted to join our girls' night, to be a part of my world, to bridge the gap that had been slowly widening between us. Instead, he had walked into a scene of my most intimate vulnerabilities laid bare, my deepest frustrations exposed for all to hear. And in that moment, I realised the magnitude of my mistake. I had betrayed his trust, violated the sanctity of our relationship, and exposed his vulnerabilities to my friends. I had turned our private struggles into public fodder, a source of gossip and amusement. The thought made my stomach churn with guilt. The words I had spoken, meant to be a light-hearted jest, now echoed in the silence, amplified by the weight of their unintended consequences. I had reduced our complex, nuanced relationship to a single crude joke, a flippant remark about his performance in bed. I had stripped him of his dignity, and in doing so, I had stripped myself of mine. Mark's reaction was swift and decisive. Without a word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. He didn't look back, didn't offer a chance for explanation or apology. He simply left, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind reeling with regret. The rest of the night was a blur. My friends, bless their hearts, tried to comfort me, to offer words of solace and support. But their voices sounded distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears. I felt numb, disconnected from the reality of the situation. I had made a terrible mistake, and I had no idea how to fix it. The drive home was a blur of tears and self-recrimination. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, each word, each expression, each agonizing moment. I imagined Mark's hurt, his confusion, his anger. I pictured him alone, grappling with the betrayal, the humiliation, the pain I had inflicted. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted and emotionally drained. I stared at the ceiling, the darkness mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. I had jeopardized the most important relationship in my life, all for the sake of a fleeting moment of validation, a cheap laugh. The following days were a torturous cycle of anxiety and regret. I called Mark repeatedly, leaving desperate messages on his voicemail, begging him to talk to me, to give me a chance to explain. But he didn't answer. He remained distant, his silence a deafening indictment of my actions. I turned to my friends for support, seeking their guidance and wisdom. They listened patiently, offering words of comfort and advice. But their words couldn't erase the guilt that gnawed at me, the shame that consumed me. I had to face the consequences of my actions, to confront the pain I had caused. The tension within our friend group was palpable. Sarah and Emily, usually, the pillars of our support system, were caught in an awkward position. They were my friends, but they had also witnessed my indiscretion. They tried to remain neutral, to offer balanced perspectives, but I could sense their unspoken judgments, their silent disapproval. The dynamics of our friendship had shifted, the unspoken rule of confidentiality broken. The trust that had bound us together had been fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be fully repaired. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of my actions grew heavier. I felt isolated, adrift in a sea of regret. I had lost Mark's trust, and I had damaged the bonds of my friendship. I had created a conflict that seemed insurmountable, a chasm that I didn't know how to bridge. This conflict, born from a moment of thoughtless honesty, had become the defining force in my life. It permeated every aspect of my existence, casting a shadow over my work, my social life, my sense of self. I was trapped in a cycle of regret, haunted by the memory of my careless words, the image of Mark's wounded eyes. This conflict that I created had destroyed my world. Mark's departure wasn't just the end of a night. It felt like the beginning of a slow, agonizing unraveling. The silence he left behind was a heavy, suffocating presence, a constant reminder of my mistake. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and regret, a relentless cycle of self-recrimination. The first few days were the worst. I was a prisoner in my own apartment, the four walls closing in on me, amplifying the echo of my careless words. Every ring of the phone, every notification, sent a jolt of panic through me, a desperate hope that it was Mark, that he was ready to talk. But the calls never came, and the silence stretched on, an agonizing testament to the damage I had done. I tried to reach out to him, of course. I called, I texted, I even sent emails, pouring my heart out in desperate pleas for forgiveness. But my words, once so easily shared, now seemed to fall on deaf ears. Mark remained silent, his absence a constant, painful reminder of my betrayal. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus on anything. My work suffered, my relationships strained. I was a ghost, haunted by the memory of my careless joke, the image of Mark's wounded eyes. And then, the ripple effect began. My friends, usually a source of unwavering support, were caught in an awkward position. They loved me, but they had also witnessed my indiscretion. The dynamic of our friendship shifted, the unspoken rule of confidentiality broken. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, tried to offer objective advice, urging me to give Mark space, to respect his need for time. But I could sense a subtle shift in her demeanour, a hint of disapproval in her usually warm eyes. Emily, the life of the party, tried to lighten the mood, to distract me with light-hearted banter and social outings. But her attempts felt forced, her laughter a little too bright, her cheerfulness a little too strained. The tension was palpable, a constant undercurrent in our conversations. I felt like a pariah, an outcast, a burden to my own friends. The trust that had bound us together had been fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be fully repaired. And then, my family got involved. My parents, always concerned about my well-being, sensed my distress and came to my rescue. But their well-intentioned intervention only added fuel to the fire. My mother, bless her heart, tried to mediate, to reason with Mark, to plead my case, but her efforts were met with a wall of resistance. Mark was polite but firm, his voice cold and distant. He needed time, he said, time to process what had happened. My father, usually a calm and collected man, was furious. He couldn't understand how I could be so careless, so thoughtless. He berated me for my actions, his words sharp and cutting, amplifying the guilt that already gnawed at me. The family gatherings, once a source of comfort and joy, became tense and awkward. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had advice, everyone had a story to share. But their words, intended to help, only served to deepen my sense of isolation. My sex life, once a private matter, became a topic of public discussion, a source of gossip and speculation. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, everyone had something to say, some unsolicited advice to offer. The invasion of privacy was suffocating. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare. I had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I didn't deserve this public shaming, this relentless scrutiny. The downward spiral continued. My work suffered, my social life dwindled, my self-esteem plummeted. I was a shell of my former self, consumed by guilt, regret, and a deep sense of shame. I started to question everything, my judgment, my character, my worth. I replayed the scene in my head, over and over, analysing every word, every gesture, every expression. I dissected my relationship with Mark, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed. I blamed myself, of course. I blamed my insecurities, my frustrations, my desire for validation. I blamed my careless tongue, my thoughtless joke, my lack of empathy. But I also blamed Mark, a little. I blamed his inability to forgive, his unwillingness to communicate, his refusal to give me a second chance. I blamed the situation, the wine, the atmosphere, the pressure to be funny, to be entertaining. The blame game was a vicious cycle, a self-destructive spiral that only deepened my despair. I was trapped in a web of my own making, a prisoner of my own regret. The world around me seemed to move on, oblivious to my pain. People went about their lives, laughing, loving, living. But I was stuck in a time warp, reliving the moment of my mistake, haunted by the ghost of my careless words. The downward spiral was relentless, a slow, agonizing descent into despair. I had lost Mark, I had damaged my friendships, I had alienated my family. I had become a stranger to myself, lost in a sea of regret. And I had no idea how to find my way back. The chaos that erupted after my careless words forced me into a period of deep, painful introspection. It was as if the noise of my life had been abruptly silenced, leaving me alone with the echo of my own mistakes. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, I was forced to confront the person I had become, the person I had revealed myself to be in that moment of thoughtless honesty. The initial wave of guilt and regret began to morph into something more profound, a desperate need to understand. Why had I said those things? What had driven me to expose Mark's vulnerabilities, to sacrifice his dignity for a cheap laugh? The answers, I realised, were buried deep within my own insecurities, my own unresolved issues. I had been feeling increasingly dissatisfied with my relationship with Mark. The spark had faded, the excitement had dwindled, and I had allowed my frustrations to fester, to grow into resentment. Instead of addressing these issues directly, with honesty and vulnerability, I had resorted to passive-aggressive jabs, to subtle digs disguised as humour. My joke about Mark's performance in bed wasn't just a random insult. It was a manifestation of my own insecurities, my own feelings of inadequacy. I had projected my dissatisfaction onto him, using his vulnerabilities as a weapon to deflect from my own. The realisation was painful, a harsh indictment of my own behaviour. I had been so consumed by my own feelings that I had failed to see the impact of my words on Mark. I had failed to recognise his humanity, his vulnerability, his right to respect. The chaos that ensued forced me to confront not only my relationship with Mark, but also my relationships with my friends and family. The dynamic of my friendships had shifted, the trust that had once bound us together fractured. I had exposed a raw nerve, violated an unspoken rule of confidentiality. My friends, caught in an awkward position, tried to offer balanced perspectives, but I could sense their unspoken judgments, their silent disapproval. I had become a liability, a source of tension, a reminder of the fragility of trust. My family, bless their well-intentioned hearts, only exacerbated the situation. Their attempts to mediate, to reason, to offer advice, only served to amplify the drama, to turn my private struggles into a public spectacle. My sex life, once a private matter, became a topic of public discussion, a source of gossip and speculation. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare. The invasion of privacy was suffocating, a constant reminder of my indiscretion. In the midst of this chaos, I began to see things differently. I realised how my words, intended as a joke, had caused immense pain. I understood the depth of Mark's hurt, the humiliation he must have felt. I also saw how well-intentioned family and friends can sometimes make things worse. Their desire to help, to fix things, can inadvertently amplify the drama, create further divisions. I learned that sometimes the best support is simply to listen, to offer empathy, to respect boundaries. The reflection was a painful process, a shedding of illusions, a confrontation with my own flaws. I had to acknowledge my own insecurities, my own shortcomings, my own capacity for cruelty. I had to learn to take responsibility for my actions, to own my mistakes, to apologize sincerely. I had to learn to communicate more effectively, to express my needs and frustrations with honesty and vulnerability. I had to learn to empathize, to see things from another person's perspective, to understand the impact of my words and actions. I had to learn to respect boundaries, to honor privacy, to value trust. The reflection was also a process of self-discovery, a journey into the depths of my own psyche. I began to understand the patterns of my behavior, the triggers that led me to act impulsively, to speak without thinking. I realized that my tendency to deflect, to avoid conflict, to use humor as a defense mechanism was ultimately self-destructive. It prevented me from addressing my issues directly, from communicating effectively, from building genuine connections. I learned that true intimacy requires vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to confront difficult emotions. It requires the courage to be authentic, to express our needs and desires, to risk being rejected or misunderstood. The reflection was a transformative experience, a catalyst for personal growth. I emerged from the chaos with a deeper understanding of myself, a greater appreciation for empathy, and a renewed commitment to building healthy, meaningful relationships. I realized that mistakes are inevitable, that we all have the capacity to hurt and be hurt. But it's how we respond to those mistakes that defines us. It's our willingness to learn, to grow, to make amends, that ultimately determines the quality of our relationships. The reflection was a painful but necessary process, a journey that led me to a deeper understanding of myself and the complexities of human connection. It was a journey that ultimately changed my life. Months passed, each one a slow, deliberate step away from the chaos that had consumed my life. The wounds, both mine and Mark's, began to heal, leaving behind scars that served as a constant reminder of the pain we had endured. The silence that had once filled my apartment began to soften, replaced by the quiet hum of self-reflection and the tentative whispers of hope. I had spent those months working on myself, confronting my insecurities, learning to communicate more effectively, and striving to become a better version of myself. I had taken a long, hard look in the mirror, and I didn't always like what I saw. But I refused to let my mistakes define me. I was determined to learn from them, to grow from them, to emerge from the ashes a stronger, more compassionate person. One evening, I received an unexpected invitation, a mutual friend's wedding. The thought of attending filled me with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Would Mark be there? How would we interact after all this time? The questions swirled in my mind, a whirlwind of uncertainty. I decided to go. I owed it to myself, to my own healing process, to face my fears and move forward. As I walked into the beautifully decorated venue, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me, a bittersweet reminder of the life I had almost lost. And then I saw him. Mark stood across the room, his eyes meeting mine. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. But then he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. We talked, really talked, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. We spoke of our mistakes, our regrets, our lessons learned. We shared our pain, our vulnerabilities, our hopes for the future. He had worked on himself too, he told me. He had learned to forgive, to let go of resentment, to embrace the power of second chances. He had found a new level of understanding, not as a lover, but as a friend. The conversation was cathartic, a release of the pent-up emotions that had lingered for months. We found a new level of connection, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. We had both changed, grown, evolved. We were no longer the same people who had stumbled through the chaos of our past. And then, something even more unexpected happened. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn to another presence, a magnetic energy that pulsed across the room. It was Mark's brother, Liam. Liam was everything Mark wasn't. He was confident, charismatic, and unapologetically himself. He had a mischievous glint in his eyes and a playful smirk that hinted at a hidden depth. We struck up a conversation, a spark igniting between us. We talked for hours, our words flowing effortlessly, our laughter echoing through the room. We shared our dreams, our passions, our fears. We connected on a level that felt both familiar and exhilarating. As the night drew to a close, I realised that something extraordinary had happened. I had found a connection, a spark, a love that felt both unexpected and right. Liam was everything I didn't know I wanted. The months that followed were a whirlwind of romance, a whirlwind of discovery, of laughter and love. Liam was my opposite, but he was also my complement. He challenged me, he pushed me, he inspired me to be the best version of myself. Our relationship was a testament to the power of second chances, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. We had both been through our own journeys of pain and healing, and we had emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Sometimes, life gives you a second chance, in the most surprising ways. It throws you curveballs, it tests your limits, it forces you to confront your own flaws. But it also offers opportunities for growth, for redemption, for love. My story isn't a fairy tale. It's a messy, complicated, imperfect tale of love, loss, and redemption. It's a story of how a careless joke, a moment of thoughtless honesty, can unravel a life and then weave it back together again, stronger and more beautiful than before. It's a story of how mistakes can lead to growth, how pain can lead to healing, how loss can lead to love. It's a story of how life, in all its chaotic glory, can surprise you with unexpected twists and turns, leading you down paths you never imagined. And in the end, that's what makes life so extraordinary, so unpredictable, so utterly beautiful. It's the unexpected moments, the surprising connections, the second chances that make the journey worthwhile. And in my case, that second chance came from the brother of the man I had lost. And he was indeed very well equipped. Subscribe to our channel for powerful real stories that touch your heart. Join a community where emotions run deep and every story brings a new perspective. Don't miss out. Hit that bell for weekly updates.